And welcome back, everybody, to episode 194 of Two Goalies, One Mic, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from at 6 different Western New York locations. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a Fatty Beer. I am joined, obviously, by co-host Connor Hurley. We have a very special guest who will be on with us in just a moment, but I had a great time this past week helping run the FHL Combine, Fatty Hockey League Combine, and the FHL Draft down for downtown location. A lot of really talented hockey players coming out of St. Franny's, Junior Sabres, Nichols. Some even came down from like Ontario to be a part of this. It was a great time. If you follow me on social media, obviously you can see we post a lot of it there, reposted on Instagram as well. You can find them at Fatty Hockey League. And of course, same at Fatty Hockey on Twitter. We actually had one kid that got drafted into the FHL that actually signed his contract today, one day later with the Erie Otters. There was another young kid, I think it's 14, 15 years old, named Andrew Daly, who there's a lot of hype around. He was one of the top picks, and from what I'm being told, he could be like a first-round draft pick in the NHL in a couple of years. So a ton of great talent for the FHL this year. We'll be playing on Wednesdays and Thursdays, either one or the other at the Harbor Center. Make sure you check it out. Great times, and go support local hockey, right? You know, it's a lot better today than it used to be back when I played. So without further ado, I do want to bring in our guest, returning guest. He was with us a couple weeks ago. Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, man of the hour. Matt, I'm sure it's been a pretty chaotic, 2 weeks since it's been a week or two since you dropped that article. I've noticed you've been on quite a few podcasts, including After the Whistle. How have things been, man? Because I imagine it's been pretty busy for you.
Yeah, it was a busy week, and last week was the Combine too, so it was a little bit of a whirlwind, kind of reacting to that story, but also pushing ahead with the off season here in the NHL draft and free agency coming up. Obviously, the Sabres have quite a few balls in the air here to juggle as they head into the off season. So the timing, I think, of the story was appropriate. I mean, it wasn't, we were going to run the story when the story was ready, but it ends up being kind of an appropriate table setter for what is going to be another interesting offseason in Buffalo.
Your thought, just your overall reactions, like the reaction that you got, I feel like was very, for the most part, positive. Just your feelings on the reactions you got from that article. And then obviously your experiences at the Combine, just follow up with that. Because I feel like in terms of the reaction, it was just very overly positive.
Yeah, I was glad that it seemed to strike a chord with the readers. You know, that's always kind of the goal with a story like that, is to get something across or shine some light on something that people want to know about, and maybe put a situation like that one in a fuller context. And yeah, I think, I kind of posted the story and just kind of didn't dive too deep into the reaction, just sort of, bits and pieces of it in the comment section or on social media, but mostly tried to not get too caught up in it. But I think overall it was promising to know that there were people out there like that were glad that it had been written, right? And glad that all of that information was in one place and that story was in one place. And certainly it seems like a lot of people around, in other markets also kind of took notice. And it's always, I'm sure Sabres fans would rather that the national media and national fans of the league kind of are looking at Buffalo for different reasons, but also I think Sabres fans also know that they want as much said about, this team as possible to, put some pressure on the decision makers to get things done and make it so that this time next year, or maybe at least in May of next year, we're talking about playoff hockey instead of the front office structure and the coaching staff and all this other inner workings of the organization.
I think one of the coolest things about that story was obviously getting Kevyn Adams on record. I think a lot of people were surprised by that, especially given the current state of the franchise. And I think it was pretty cool for him to agree to that. And also the fact that you've established enough of a rapport to know that, yeah, maybe it wasn't going to be the most positive story, but his perspective was absolutely vital to it. Talk to us a little bit about that process and how you feel maybe he received it or the organization received it and where they go from here. Because obviously, like, it was pretty eye-opening. Some of the articles, I know one that's really struck a chord and that's gone pretty viral was that there was no plan in place. And I think a lot of us have had that perception, but to actually see it in writing and hear it from people throughout the league or former employees and whatnot was pretty wild to see in writing. Just talk about the process of getting Kevyn Adams to agree to sit down to that and the reaction since.
Yeah, I mostly had, I had a draft of the story written before I went to Kevyn Adams. And so I was prepared as I was going through the process and writing the story for him to not want to speak. They were in, at the time we spoke, it was a few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago now almost. So they were kind of in this limbo a little bit as far as, was Kevyn Adams coming back? And, how did this end of season meeting go? What changes would there be? Like, this was right around when they hired Eric Stahl, I think, maybe, a couple days after. And so, yeah, like I had a version written or a draft written, preparing for the fact that he would maybe not want to, but I was very much open to hearing that, his perspective, obviously getting his version of events and his version of his response also to certain things, right? People are saying things about how he got this job or his qualifications for the job and the job that he's done. And I want him to have a chance to respond to that. So I don't know if I was surprised that he agreed to sit down. They're always open to this sort of thing and thoughtful about, they're not just saying no right away to things like this. And like you said, I've now been dealing with Kevyn for 3 seasons, and I've also done a lot of positive stories on the Sabres, and I think he recognizes that and I think he wanted a chance to tell his side of things as well and respond to some of these things because he's got a lot of professional pride. And I appreciated that he was willing to sit down. I think they talk a lot about accountability and things like that. And this to me is a little bit of what that looks like to sit down and answer to some of these questions. And I think once I explained where I was coming from with the story in terms of why I was writing it and what my goal was, I think he was receptive to the interview. It wasn't the most comfortable interview I'm sure he's ever had, but he got a chance to say some things to just pretty much everything that was in there. Some of those quotes I just read to him verbatim, as we were talking to kind of get his side of things or how he would respond. And so I appreciated it. I think the story was fuller because of it. And it gave me, was able to lay everything out there and kind of let the reader interpret it how they wanted to.
You use the word pride, and you can say a lot. You can say a lot of good and bad. I say about Kevyn Adams, but I was, when I was kind of thinking about today's episode and talking about Kevyn, pride is definitely a word I would use. When he's a very prideful guy, he takes a lot of pride in what he does. He has no shortcomings when it comes to that. One of the things from your article, and I guess there was things that we suspected or already maybe kind of knew that were confirmed by your article. So, that's what was so refreshing to me. But one of the things I could have swore I remember hearing about it, or maybe it was just a rumor, but the fact that the guy had to fire 20 people that you could arguably say that may have been more qualified to be a GM than he was on day one, to me, was insane, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that day. I was covering the Bills at the time, and when you're not in the weeds covering a beat, everything's moving really fast. I think that was kind of part of what motivated me to write the article, is that, especially because I wasn't here when he got hired, I wasn't covering this beat when he got hired. Some of it gets lost in translation, or it becomes kind of the narrative kind of runs out of control, and you kind of want to just piece it all together, right? And separate fact from fiction. What's rumor? What's real? What happened? How did it all go down? And that was sort of the impetus for writing it, I think, to begin with. And that, it's an interesting thing, because obviously if Jason Botterill had agreed to fire those people, maybe he keeps his job, right? And he probably keeps his job, and Kevyn Adams doesn't get the job. If the pandemic doesn't happen, Kevyn Adams probably doesn't become GM, at least not when he did. There's also the other side of things where you say, okay, if you're Kevyn Adams, you have a pretty unique opportunity to become an NHL general manager. And you have to, in order to do it, you have to basically fire all these people, start from scratch. And these people are probably getting fired anyways, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of the unspoken thing here, is that somebody was going to fire these people. Terry Pegula had made up his mind to go leaner and to kind of, just trim some budget, essentially. So it's not an easy spot to start if you're Kevyn Adams. I mean, I think you open yourself up to criticism, obviously, for how you get the job when you do that, but you also are starting with not a lot of people around you, and you're in a spot where what people are going to say when you do something like that. And hockey's a small world, the circle, the community is tight, and there was a lot of longtime good hockey people that lost jobs in that whole mess. So that's why it was important to me, I guess, to tie. This wasn't just a Kevyn Adams story, right? It was a Terry Pegula story too. And it's hard to have one without the other. And Terry Pegula, putting him in that spot speaks, I think, to how he's run the team and how they've ended up with a league record playoff drought that, I don't want to say it doesn't have any end in sight, but it's not necessarily gonna end next season unless some things change. So it's tough to place all the blame for that situation on Kevyn Adams, I guess.
One of the big things that's changed since, or right around the same time, is obviously Jarmo, the hiring of a senior advisor. Finally, I think we spoke about it when you were on last, as him being a potential candidate, obviously with prior GM experience, with actually a relatively good track record, not necessarily playoff success, but bringing in big time names. Obviously, rest in peace, Johnny Gaudreau. But when the Blue Jackets signed Johnny Gaudreau, it sent a shockwave in the hockey world. Nobody expected the Blue Jackets to sign Johnny Gaudreau. And the Sabres are in a similar spot in the sense that they're obviously, everybody knows about the playoff drought, but nobody's really expecting free agents to come to Buffalo this summer. So yeah, just your general reaction to the Jarmo Kekäläinen signing, how you potentially think that not only with unrestricted free agents, but in one of your recent articles, you talked about the tricky situation of a lot of these restricted free agent contracts that the Sabres are dealing with and potential trades, obviously Bowen Byram probably being the most likely. How do you think Jarmo will help the Sabres with the navigation over the next month and a half?
I think it's a really big addition. I mean, he's the most experienced guy in the front office right now. It's kind of crazy, but they've needed this type of person for a long time. And they talked about possibly getting a senior advisor when Kevyn Adams first got on the job. So they've gone through the process before of vetting candidates for a job like this. And it's pretty clear how badly they've needed more experience in the front office. And I think Jarmo Kekäläinen in particular brings a certain track record, like you said, of making some bold and aggressive moves in free agency via trades, kind of having, the ability to quickly, act decisively, be proactive, all those things. He also has the personality of, he's got a strong personality. He's pretty blunt. He's also really well liked in the hockey community, just known as a really good guy, but somebody that's going to stand up for what he believes in. And I think that is what you want. You don't want somebody who just has kind of one foot in and he's just there to be a name, on your staff list. I think Jarmo Kekäläinen very much wants to be a general manager again someday. And I like that fact. I want him to have that hunger and to want to do well here and use it to become a GM, whether it's here in Buffalo or somewhere else. You want a guy that still has the hunger to do the job. And this is not a guy using this as a stepstone to retirement or a way to cash a check. Like, I feel like he wants to help get the Sabres somewhere so that he can, slap that on his resume. I mean, if they get to the playoffs, given how the fan base feels about Kevyn Adams, probably an uneven amount of credit is going to go to the senior advisor, right? People are going to really want to put some credit on the new face that's in the front office, and that's an opportunity, I think. So I think his personality, his track record, and just his frame of mind will be of an asset for this front office.
Do you almost see him as like a silent GM? Like it's a win-win situation for him, right? Like he's not going to get the blame really if things don't go right. And at the end of the day, if the things don't go right, he could end up being the GM. So like in my mind, like he might very well be leaned on more than most senior advisors by Kevyn Adams, and like almost as a silent GM.
It's hard to say until, I don't know that at this point. It's hard to say until they really get into the meat of the off season and we start to hear more about his influence or see more of his influence. But I do think he will have, I'll say this, I think he has a chance to become the general manager of the Sabres regardless of how things go. I think even if things go really well, people have often talked about, a restructure of the front office where Kevyn Adams moves up and, somebody else moves into the GM role. I've never liked that idea because I have never looked at the staff and thought that there was a future GM on staff. But now Jarmo Kekäläinen, you could see that. So maybe things go well. Kevyn Adams wants to, take on a different role. Maybe it's a bigger title, but one where he doesn't have to be in front of the camera and microphone as often or as front facing with all these decisions. And now he has a capable person to turn to if he wants to do that. And to your point, if things don't go well, you have an interim candidate right there. So
yeah,
it's an interesting situation, but encouraging that they at least seem to be seeing the light in terms of needing more experienced, strong voices in the front office, whether it's Kekäläinen or Eric Stahl, just something a little bit different and some different perspectives, because this is a tricky offseason in a lot of ways. I really feel like it's a delicate one, and they're already one of the teams of the offseason, based on all the chatter at the combine and everything, the RFAs that they have, the drought, the pressure on Adams, all of it is adding up to them being a team to watch heading up to July 1st.
And leading up to that, obviously there's so much that could happen before the draft, before free agency. What do you think is the most likely next big piece of news to come out of the Sabres? Whether that be Alex Tuch contract restructure, Bowen Byram traded, a new offer for JJ Peterka, or any of the restricted free agents. What do you think is most likely to happen first? Potentially even before the draft, that could be the domino that sets a lot of these other moves in place.
It's tough to say. I feel like the most likely of those ones that you mentioned, I mean, Alex Tuch can't sign until July 1st. Peterka, Peterka and Byram are both interesting. It feels like the Byram one is a little bit more front and center right now, or maybe, more likely to happen first if it happens at all. I don't think they're feeling like they have to move Bo and Byram. I don't think they're at that point, but I think they're open to exploring what's out there and seeing if they can get a good return for them. They are also going to be in a position where if they want to wait on him, if they want to wait on Peterka until like right up until the draft or during the draft or even after the draft, that's an option. The one other thing that I'm still curious about, and I haven't completely closed the door on, is like, is there going to be any sort of addition to this coaching staff, addition or change of any kind? So I kind of have my eye on that the next little while here, just because everything is basically done as far as the coaching carousel. And so assistants shaking loose, this would be sort of the final wave of assistants that will be available. Obviously there's a couple teams still playing and, still some stuff going on in the AHL, but if they wanted to make a move there, this seems like it would be a good window to do it. So I was under the impression as of a few weeks ago that they were still open to upgrading, the assistant coaches or changing some things out, but obviously we haven't seen anything yet. And a lot of, pretty good coaches have been snatched up. So I also have my eye on that. And then, the roster stuff, it feels like it might end up being closer to the draft.
Yeah. You bring up adding to the assistants. I mean, not that he'd even be interested, but you see a guy like James Patrick, who's up for Coach of the Year in the CHL right now, obviously has a long history as an assistant to Lindy Ruff in the past. I think he even stayed on with him when Lindy left Buffalo for a little while at least. So, like, I mean, names like that. And it doesn't have to be like a Sabres alumni. I know people like to yell Jay McKee or, Michael Pekka. Like, I was a big Michael Pekka guy too, but like, doesn't have to be a guy, somebody with experience, someone that's been there and can, run a power play or has experience running a successful power play. Because right now it could be Appert again, and it didn't go so well last year, and he didn't have a great power play in Rochester either when he was a coach there. So I would like to feel more confident in that staff. And as of right now, you said you haven't given up hope, but they might be running that same staff back, which again is a little concerning. Getting back to your article again too. Another thing that really kind of like stuck out to me, and when Kim gave that vote of confidence to Jason Botterill, I know you've talked about other podcasts too, just want to touch on it for a moment. Like the 3 weeks in between that and when he was invited down to Florida, was it on the yacht or super yacht or whatever it was, to have that conversation. And obviously that was in part built on the relationship they had already built together, due to he was signed to that business position before becoming GM. And however the relationship was built between Terry Pegula and Kim and Kevyn Adams, in your own opinion, what do you think that really came down to? Was it Botterill just sticking his foot in the ground and saying, I am not firing all of these people. I'm not doing that. I'm not putting myself in an even worse situation than we were last year, having a smaller staff, less scouts, et cetera. Like, is that really what it boiled down to, Matt?
I think it was just purely business. I mean, Kevyn Adams at that time was approaching, his job was the business, right? So they were talking about right sizing the business. And I think Botterill had a certain conviction about him and principles, right, of agreements that he made on contracts or extensions that were going to he was going to do with these various staff. And I just think he's the type of person that really mattered to him, that he was not gonna do that. And so much of what they were going into that thinking about was business related, right? It's why I say if the pandemic doesn't happen, Kevyn Adams doesn't become GM when he does, because they were really evaluating, like, look, we're not going to be playing hockey for a while. We're not going to have games. We might not have fans. The business is already hurting. How do we do this. And Kevyn Adams and Terry Pegula, I think, were thinking about things through that business lens. And so that strikes me about that whole time, is because whatever you want to say about Kevyn Adams' path to the job, his resume leading up, which is unconventional, right? It's sort of one of one in the NHL. The fact that he was not up against any other candidates for this job, they didn't interview anybody. They just hired him. Those two things are, separate. You still are going into this thinking it was more about business than it was about hockey, and there wasn't a grand hockey vision necessarily that was sold, but there was, it was business first, hockey second, it felt like. And maybe that was just the reality of where the situation, right? The pandemic and everything else. But how long has it taken them to get back to the point where hockey is first? Is hockey still, they haven't spent to the cap since that point. So that was somewhat striking when you layer it in with his background and experience and the fact that they didn't consider any other candidates. It all adds up to no wonder it hasn't worked, right? And nobody should really be surprised, I guess, that it hasn't, despite the fact that they've done some good things. Kevyn Adams has made some decent moves over the last 5 years. You have a GM learning on the job, a job that he didn't, take the same steps that everybody else usually takes to get it. And then he is kind of learning on the fly while operating with a lean staff. And they're basically, a normal size staff now, but took a while to get there, and operating, in a flat cap environment without spending to the ceiling. So I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that the drought's gone from 9 to 14 years since then.
Is there and I know Connor wants to cut in tier two, but I'll make it quick. One quote too that again stuck out in 2014 when Harbor Center officially opened, the Pegulas purchased the NFL Buffalo Bills. That meant less time around the Sabres for Terry. Everything Bills was always more important than everything Sabres, said one former Pegula employee who worked on the hockey side. It's been helter-skelter for the Sabres ever since he bought the Bills. And I've been a big advocate of that. I've always said, and this isn't a shot at Connor, but it's like being the redheaded stepchild to the Buffalo Bills. I know. I'm sorry, but it is though. It feels like it. And that really stuck out to me too. Has it really been like that? And was that like a consensus among everybody you interviewed when that point came up since they bought the Bills, that the Sabres really took a back seat?
I don't know if it was like a hard and fast line, right? It's like they buy the Bills, who cares about the Sabres? I don't think it was overnight change, but I think all you have to do is look at some of their actions. And I don't think Terry and Kim Pegula cared any less about the Sabres, especially Terry. Like, we know how he feels about this team. I think he wanted a winner and all those things. But I think your attention gets splintered, right? And they have not, I don't think, done a reasonable enough job of putting people in place to make it so that when their attention gets splintered, that there's people there that make up for that. They don't have experienced hockey people running this team. They have not had a COO or a president that had a previous job with an NHL team since they fired Ted Black. Yeah. So, it was Russ Brandon, Ron Raccuia, John Roth, Pete Guelli. These were all. John Roth was came from the banking world. The other three guys are NFL guys, and even like Bruce Popko was COO at one point. He was an NFL guy. So I think if you look at actions, you look at where the money is spent. Like, I don't personally question their care for the Sabres, but I think it's impossible to not have your attention divided. And the NFL is big business that requires a lot of your capital, requires a lot of your attention, also makes you a ton of money. And that team's really good. right? Like you kind of I think you would naturally gravitate over there. And look, that's why it was important to kind of outline how Terry was when he bought the Sabres, because it's impossible to be like that when you also own an NFL team, right? You're going to be going to training camp and opening weekend of the NFL, and probably going to miss some of those prospect games, right? And you're going to not be at every single game because you're going to be on the plane. You know, when the palm trees thing happened and there were people bringing palm trees to the arena, if I remember correctly, Terry Pegula was on the way to LA for a Bills game. So, you know, the little things like that he probably previously wouldn't have missed, right? He would have been front and center for. I think to your question, like, it was felt over time by people on the hockey side, and it created a different type of environment where it felt like the Bill stuff was clouding things a little bit.
Yeah, perception wasn't good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and the actions back that up, I think, too. Like, the actions tell you a story as well.
On the Terry subject, I think a lot of people are past the point of caring whether he ever speaks about the Sabres publicly again. But it is kind of jarring that he hasn't really, I think, since 2020. And that doesn't help the perception that he doesn't care about the Sabres as much as he does about the Bills. In your professional opinion, being around the team as much as you are, even Kevyn Adams, obviously he is a mouthpiece for the organization. And of course, Terry is the owner. Like, is there any chance, whether it's in the next few months or before the season or at any point at all, that maybe we will ever hear from Terry Pegula again publicly, not only about the organization and as a hockey team, but even the arena, even everything surrounding the Sabres as an entire organization, that would at least answer some of the questions that a lot of people are still concerned about. Like Duane, every single time we talk about the seats, he tells the same story about how there's a certain like brand of nacho cheese that's still on the back of one seat that he was at
10 years ago,
15 or 20 years ago. Like they have the old logos still, like the floor is green, everything's cracking. Like, obviously it's not necessarily, this is why he hires people. He doesn't have to, but given the state of the franchise, like, do you think there's any chance we ever hear from Terry Pegula ever again about the Sabres?
I think so. It's tricky. Like, what context that will be in, I don't know. But he did. So he hasn't really spoken about the Bills either, or taken questions about the Bills in a while either. I'm trying to remember the exact timeline. He spoke when the stadium deal was approved. That was at a smaller NFL owners meetings, like the NFL owners meetings. There's a couple of different ones. One happens during the season, so there's not as much media coverage. There's one that happens in March, I believe it is, that quite a bit of media goes to, local as well. So when he's spoken at that, he's sort of asked a wide variety of questions, including some Sabres questions. I believe the last NFL owners meetings I went to while I was on the Bills beat was 2019. And I believe he and Kim both spoke, I think, and they were asked about the Sabres a little bit. Obviously in 2020 they talked, but even like Bills questions, he spoke at that smaller owners meetings in the fall. But of course, like, people there, the Sabres probably aren't on their radar, and he's only speaking for like 6 or 7 minutes. You're probably not going to get a Sabres question in. It strikes me that at some point he'll probably talk. Like, if he talks about the Bills, if he's answering questions and it's local, then the Sabres are going to come up. So, like, that's why I say I think at some point we'll hear from him. Is it vitally important? In most cases, I would say probably not. It feels somewhat important in this case because I feel like I get asked about it a lot. I feel like fans ask me about it. Like, I don't openly complain about the fact that he doesn't talk. There's people just asking me, like, why doesn't he talk? I think people want to hear from him. I think it could be beneficial because people want to know he cares.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a really easy way to show, if you have an emotional 10-minute back and forth with reporters, I think at least fans would be like, well, at least he cares. At least he's trying. Mm-hmm. And whether it's true or not, whether it's fair or not, when you don't, you leave a lot up to interpretation, and perception becomes that you don't care enough to talk. Now, he's not always been the best at it either, right? So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. He gets up there and says some stuff that people can rip him for, but I don't know. I guess maybe it's the optimist in me that says we'll hear from him again at some point.
Yeah, like you said, perception at this point is kind of everything, right? Perception not just from your fan base, but from just the league. Going back to your article for a second, like getting like the hiring of Kekäläinen, or if they had any other candidates, like the perception that you as an owner have projected on your franchise, and obviously the fan base comes into it too. That makes it harder for you to run business and be taken seriously. And obviously, you have a 14-year playoff drought. Like, has that perception made it that much more difficult for them to run this team to become a successful franchise? Because, what is there from the outside looking in? Anything good to say about this franchise right now due to the perception that ownership has kind of projected?
Yeah, I think, especially in the NHL where your revenue is so tied to your gate, right? Like your attendance really matters to the bottom line, connecting with your customers. The NFL is, you roll out of bed and you make money because that league and the revenue sharing, the way it's set up with their TV deals, like you're making money hand over fist in that league without lifting a finger. The NHL is a lot different. And, you're not guaranteed a profit when you step on the ice in the fall. So that's why I feel like it does matter to an extent, is because people feel so alienated and fed up and disconnected. Like, that's the part that gets me, is that it's a small, prideful place, Buffalo, that cares a lot about its sports teams, cares a lot about hockey, and the sport itself. You see it with the TV ratings. To feel disconnected from the NHL team just feels like, this, it's unfathomable in some ways how it's gotten to this point because of the damage that's been done to the fan base. And I don't blame any of those people for feeling that way. It's just a shame that it's gotten to that point, because you have to punch above your weight when you're Buffalo, being in the big leagues, right? You're one of the smallest markets in the league, and you can't really afford too many years like this of, it hurts the bottom line. And so I think, yeah, there is, would Terry speaking help that? I don't know, but at this point, it's hard to imagine it would hurt.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. This is not a question, more of a statement. If you're a fan of either team, I'm not sure how you wouldn't subscribe to The Athletic at this point. Like, I actually get all of my information and most of my reporting from both you, Joe, and Tim at this point. And some of the stories that are coming out and the features like you did on Kevyn Adams are so incredibly compelling, and they're different from a lot of the other media that we are receiving as Buffalo sports fans, as consumers of content. So for everybody that's listening, like, I cannot stress enough how worth it is to subscribe. For the past however many years, I swear Matt didn't tell me to say this, and I don't work for The Athletic, but for 7-8 years now, just having the Buffalo tab of The Athletic on my saved tabs and just clicking that every day, and the amount of content I get from that page on a day-to-day basis makes me a smarter fan. It also makes me honestly able to tolerate what you just said. Like, how there are as many passionate fans of the Sabres still through 14 years, and that goes to the New York Jets, and that goes to everybody. It speaks to the level of passion that we have in Buffalo. And even me being out in LA for 10 years now, like, it makes me feel closer to the city, and it would do everybody a service to subscribe as quickly as possible, because obviously we have a few slow months coming up here in the summer, but journalism and this type of story that we're talking about today, and why we had you on again, is the type of stuff that really matters, and it keeps us all going, quite frankly. So I commend you for your work, and keep up the good work.
I appreciate it. And I think, I should say, like, Buffalo and the way people care is part of why The Athletic worked in Buffalo and continues to work, right? Like, we don't cover every single NHL team with a dedicated beat writer the way that we did when we first launched, just like the reality of the business. But Buffalo, despite, a 14-year playoff drought, being one of the smallest markets in the league, like, is still one that we have a dedicated beat writer for, and that's because of people like yourself and the fans in Buffalo that still read, and the amount of people that read this story and all year. I mean, my numbers don't indicate that people are any less clued into this team or any less fired up about what's going on or what's going to happen in the off season, and that makes this job like awesome, right? Like, even though they're not good, but there's a lot of interesting stories, and there's a lot of people that really want to read them. And there's people that see a story like the one last week and aren't mad that you're, taking, a deep probing look at something like that. They're glad you're doing it, right? They want, a certain standard for their hockey team. And I just really appreciate it. So I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate everybody who reads and subscribes or, watch it. Chris Baker and I have a podcast, the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show, that, we have a, like
Great
you guys, kind of a, little community of listeners and stuff. Like, all those people it makes the job so much fun. Like, people that care about hockey. There's something, I covered the NFL for a long time, and covering the NFL is great. It was fun. Covering the Bills is great. But the thing about hockey is that it's kind of this like niche underdog sport, right? And so it's like anybody who is, commenting on one of my articles in the middle of March, right, and on game 65 of another lost season, like, those are my people, right? Like, the people that are listening to our podcast or listening to us here in June talk about this hockey team trying to figure this out. Like, I've always loved this sport and, have followed this league forever. So like those are my people. And I have a lot of fun, trying to serve it. It means a lot to me to try to serve those people with stuff that they can't get somewhere else.
Yeah. Like, we're the ride and dies, right? Like, we're there through thick and thin, no matter how great or bleak it might be. And I've been subscribed to The Athletic now, honestly, for probably about 4 years. And, between you, Tim Graham, and then, I know Connor's a big fan, but Sean McIndoe, another one of my favorites, over at The Athletic. Just, I couldn't stress it more. If you like, if you like, print media, whether you're reading it on your phone or however you take it in, I couldn't stress it enough. Subscribe to The Athletic, no doubt about it. And
I should also shout out John Vogel for building up that Sabres subscriber.
Well, I was going to bring that up, but I can't remember. He was the very first person after the whole rant thing that interviewed me. He actually knew the first game I went to after everything happened 5 years ago, or a long while ago. He sought me out at a game, and we actually stood in the aisle, and he interviewed me. I think he was with The Athletic at the time.
No, yeah, he definitely was. I remember that story, and I remember when The Athletic launched, and it was me, Tim, and John when it first launched, and we later added Joe Yerdon was there for a few years, and we added Joe Biscaglia, I think, a year after the launch. But I didn't know John Vogel before we launched, but it was we sort of both got together before agreeing to take the job, and I still talk to John, and he was super helpful to me when I started this job, and I felt a lot of responsibility to take care of his readers, right? Like the people that signed up to read John. He set a bar, and I've just been trying to match that.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I remember him just, I think this is what he said. We were talking about like the state of like everything away from the ice and the smell of the arena. He just goes, "Yeah, it smells disgusting in here."
Still does.
It still does.
Yeah, it's not the best arena in the league, that's for sure.
No,
but it's ours.
It's ours.
Right.
Yeah, it's our shithole. My last question in regards to the article, and then I have a couple questions in here from people watching. There's a lot, that's been said between your article and just when you were actually on other podcasts too, about the perception of Kevyn Adams having not gone through, kind of taken the shortcut, right? And not been a guy that went to Fargo or Medicine Hat, as you wrote in your article. Like, how much, when you're a player making your decision on where you want to play, and maybe the Sabres do come up, like, how much does that really affect? And like, in terms of whether or not he was qualified, I mean, going back to the day he was hired, how much does that really matter? I think it's obvious that it does matter. I think we've all been in situations in our lives where, you're dealing with somebody above you that's a relationship hire, right? They weren't there with the company through the entire grind, things you went through, and then all of a sudden, because they're so-and-so's best friend, all of a sudden they're your boss. How much has that mattered in the grand scheme of things? The fact that he wasn't in Medicine Hat, that he wasn't in Fargo, that he wasn't scouting, world championships and in person and whatnot. How much has that really mattered?
I don't know like how much it directly matters. I don't know how much players in the league are super plugged in or aware of that. They just know that he's the GM now, right? They didn't, look at his resume. But I think it adds to the overall perception of the organization, and the fact that they're not spending to the cap, that probably hurts them more. The way they've been under Terry Pegula's ownership, the drought, all of that stuff is tied in. So Kevyn Adams' lack of qualifications or whatever, like that only matters because he's followed it up with 5 years of poor results, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you don't have the results and you have that, I think it adds to it. And I don't know, I would think if it has an impact, it might more so be with either agents or other teams, and making deals. But at the same time, he's made a lot of trades, right? And he's signed some play. He's, been able to get a lot of business done. So I don't know how much it has impacted him, but it has, I think, impacted the team in that he hasn't done the greatest job in the last 5 years and hasn't gotten the team over the hump. So it's definitely part of everything. I just don't know if players really know the difference between Kevyn Adams and Steve Staios versus Kent Hughes. Kent Hughes maybe because he was an agent, so some of them might be familiar with him, but I don't know if players are studying the resumes of the GMs around the league.
Anything final before we get to the fan questions, Connor?
No, let's get right to them. Let's do it. I'm interested to hear some of these.
Well, first off, I got to pull up on the screen in a second, but I guess Chris Baker can't yell at Matthew for not plugging the pod this time. Did he really give you grief for that?
He was busting my balls for that on our last podcast. I was trying to rack my brain. I'm like, I feel like I did plug it, but I must not have.
I think we might have talked about it. I know Connor brought it up. Maybe it wasn't the last time, but maybe it was the time before that. I remember vividly Connor at least bringing it up. So
doing my best out here.
Yep, right. We have a question here from John Park. Question for you guys and Matthew. Do you think this article will have any impact on how things go down at KeyBank Center in any way? Again, going back to perception.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not the type of person that likes to give myself that much credit, right? To think that something I write is going to dramatically change how business is done, but it didn't turn the pressure down, I guess, right? So it's possible, but I'd like to think that there were some signs of urgency, at least a little bit of urgency beforehand. And so I think there's urgency from that group in general going into the offseason. And I think I will say, there is some degree of, to your point, perception, right? And the Athletic is a national outlet. And so, this type of story, gets talked about nationally. And at some point you would think that would wear on Terry Pegula, like this national perception of his team. But he's had a lot of faith here in Kevyn Adams. So I don't know how much differently they're going to operate necessarily. And if they do, they probably were going to do that anyways.
From Blake, do you think Adams sees this as a core that can win a cup, or we'll just say let's fill and make the playoffs, or does he believe that another reset is coming if the season goes sideways again? And he asked another question in the chat: how long is Kevin's leash going into the season before he may, be looking for a new job?
I think he has a degree of belief in this core, but I think he recognizes that he needs to adjust the plan a little bit. I think he's been really slow to adjust the plan. And I think he's recognizing that they need to kind of alter course. His leash is a lot shorter now that Kekäläinen's here, in my opinion. Like the fact that there's actually somebody to turn to. Before, when it was Karmanos and Jerry Fortin, nothing against those guys. I just didn't view that as a situation where those guys would have the sway or the cachet to step into that job, like to convince Terry Pegula that he shouldn't just ride it out, with Kevyn. Now he's got a guy who's done the job, who projects a certain confidence and has a track record to back it up. And that would, I think, by mid-season, if things are, if they're back where they were last December, I mean, man, if that happens again, that was quite a month. But if that were to happen again, now they have an option to turn to. Before they didn't really have one, in my opinion. So that makes things a little bit different.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I did have a question here from Twitter from Patrick Wolf. Ask Matthew if he has ever gotten the sense that the league Bettman has spoken to the Sabres and Terry about the front office woes. Seems like they have a vested interest in it not becoming a mockery.
I asked Bill Daly. So I did another story in March about attendance and, the state of business and how damaging the drought has been for that. And when I reached out to Bill Daly, he very quickly responded that they have no concerns about Buffalo and that they have strong committed ownership and a great market. So that, of course, is a public relations answer to an extent. But I do think they like Buffalo. Gary Bettman's always liked Buffalo. And I think the league is more interested in expansion than they are moving teams around anymore. So would that change under a different commissioner? It's possible, but I think they have a certain level of patience because they recognize a lot of this is bad hockey maneuvering above all else, where like they have had situations in the past with really bad ownership, right? And checks not clearing and different things like that. Like at least they have some stability. It's just been really bad hockey wise. It's been bad business wise too, don't get me wrong, but I don't get the sense that the league is like overly concerned, but who knows what they're saying behind closed doors.
And then I guess one thing added to that, we had Harrington on right after the news came out about the arena and the county's lease and everything related to that. I know people were a bit concerned when that news came out, and then obviously it was reported soon after that there is no concern whatsoever and that the county's not going to be taking over the arena. The Sabres are going to be able to take care of it, or they're going to be able to extend their lease. What have you heard from your perspective on that? And then even beyond that, like obviously we've mentioned many times, and we're going to continue to mention it until the cows come home, that it is in very, very poor condition. Has there been anything said of not only extending the lease, but potentially making improvements aside from the roof? And the roof and the scoreboard are two tangible things that we can point to, and they actually pointed to them last offseason as this is how we win. Clearly it wasn't how they won on the ice, but how they win with the fans and in actually improving the fan experience. Is there anything to be said to that in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the near future?
Nothing new that I know of. One of the things on my to-do list this offseason is to dig a little deeper into that. And so I don't know of anything at the moment, but I know it seems like they have sort of a plan to, slowly in phases upgrade the building, but obviously the lease thing was a bit of a curveball this spring that seems like it throws a potential unknown into the mix going forward as far as upkeep of that building. And also, I don't know, anytime that type of stuff gets thrown out there, you're wondering about what it means about, the state of the team, where it is. But like I said, relocation doesn't strike me as an imminent threat just because the league is so interested in expansion. So I don't have anything new for you on the arena, but maybe more to come at some point.
Sweet.
Awesome. That's good to hear. One final question from the chat, then we got to get you out of here. The two-parter from Gargalant, and I'm not sure if this was something that was rumored or not, but hey, just got here, Matt. Did you admit in your article that Adams traveled with the team and actually did an audit on Botterill's operation for Pegula? And the second part of that question was, is it more accurate to say that Pegula depends on Adams to do what he wants rather than believes in him?
I think it's a combination. So I had in the story that he was on the road with the team. I think it was pretty unclear in my reporting that, and the quote didn't make it into the story, but I did sort of ask Kevin about that, about what he was doing. And I don't think it wasn't entirely clear to me that he did some sort of audit or anything like that. I mean, I audit maybe in the sense of, like I said, when he went down to Florida, there was a lot of talk about business, right? And there was talk about right sizing the business. And so, but I don't think there was an audit on like the job he was doing, building the team, building the roster, or anything like that. But that's not to say that it for sure didn't happen. It was just I wasn't confident enough in it to, put that in there. And when I asked Kevin about it, he had a different version. And so I wasn't, confident enough to say that. So I can't sit here and say that he did that. I think he obviously was looking at, from the business side, and he was traveling a lot and building a relationship with Ralph Kruger and other people in the building. So there was stuff he was doing, exactly what he was doing. And, what he may or may not have relayed to Terry Pegula was a little bit unclear. And so I wasn't comfortable going there.
Okay. And one last quick question, just because they just popped in here before we let you go. You spoke to multiple insiders. What was the most candid thing that you heard about Adams or Pegula that maybe didn't make the final article, if you can say so?
Probably, I mean, anything that was there's a bar, I guess. Like there was candid things I heard that I can't really say. There was a bar in this story for, using anonymous quotes and allowing anonymity and what would be in there. So like strong opinions about Kevin or Terry were kind of, especially personally, it just wasn't germane, wasn't relevant necessarily to the story and the timeline of events. And this wasn't a column. This wasn't an opinion story, right? So, they were left out for a reason. So I wouldn't,
that's fine.
Wouldn't say them, but I will, of the ones that were in there, I think the strongest one kind of came probably at the end. I mean, obviously there's the stuff about him not being, on the road and Medicine Hat and X, Y, and Z, talking about his path. But the idea that, speaking about both Kevin and Terry, right? Like the former exec who said that, if I'm going to run this for you, like if I have to call you about every little thing, like what exactly are we doing here? And that was a pretty blunt assessment that I think a lot of people probably share. And especially readers were probably looking at it like, glad somebody said it out loud type of thing. But yeah, I mean, in the course of a conversation like this, you have hours of conversations where lots of things are said. And part of my job is to, in terms of being, accurate and fair and all those things, is to weed out, sometimes you could talk to somebody for an hour and a half and 5 minutes of it's useful. or to the actual story. It's all useful background and stuff to have, you know, in your knowledge bank. But what actually makes the story sometimes isn't quite as extensive, especially when you're trying to keep. I mean, you could write a book about this team. Like, had to keep it to right around 3,000 words. So
Yeah.
a lot of stuff didn't make the cut.
Matt, thank you for giving us your time again, especially with such a short amount of time between obviously appearances. There's a reason why when you guys like you and like Mike are on with us, it's some of our most viewed content, and I appreciate you giving us the time, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Have a good night, guys.
We can't wait for the book.
Yeah, you better give
it.
it.
Yeah, I got to get a waiting list, maybe. Like, I need people to agree to buy it. It's like such a demoralizing subject that I'm not sure that it really is.
It would be a hate buy for sure. But
right, I'm not sure publishers would be lining
I honestly
up.
think you'd get a long waiting list. I really do.
Right.
I believe it.
If I can get some, people that I can bring to a publisher and say, look, these people all say they're going to buy it, then maybe I can agree to have somebody pay me to write it.
We got a comment in here too. Is like, do you think this playoff drought will end up on a 30 for 30? Maybe you can help direct that.
Yeah, like that would. I don't know. The longer the drought goes on, maybe the more likely it actually becomes a book. It's like so bad that it's interesting. But
I think you'd write that book right now.
They're a fascinating organization, that's for sure. They keep me busy.
Thanks again, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you
That was
soon.
Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic. Connor, always one of my favorite guests, man.
He's the best, and in my opinion, along with Mike, one of the best guys to consistently cover the Sabres. We just lost Lance from the Buffalo News to the Bills beat. Another really, really good reporter who did a great job over the past few years. And there's not many guys that are specifically devoted to, especially to a team as futile as the Sabres. So to have someone that's on the inside that is in all the press conferences is pretty great.
Yeah, and the one thing I love about having him on too, man, is just like he doesn't give you just a meat and potatoes answer. He really goes deep into it, Connor.
Oh, it's pretty amazing to hear, especially his thought process, that what went into that story and how many people he reached out to, and the condition of anonymity in journalism is pretty difficult sometimes, because I think it can be perceived as cowardly. It can be perceived as not necessarily getting to the point in the way that you should, but it's also necessary sometimes because people want to keep their jobs. Players do it. They do an anonymous player poll all the time about the state of certain arenas, the state of certain franchises and cities to travel to, not only in the NHL, but also the NFL. So sometimes it is necessary, and it gives you articles like with what we got with Matthew. And obviously not all of his stuff was off the record. He got the GM of the team with the longest playoff drought in the league to speak on a fairly negative piece, which I thought was the coolest part of the story. And it speaks to not only his relationship with Kevyn Adams, but the respect that the media department and the PR department has in the way that he covers the team. So that's pretty remarkable. And the stuff that he puts out there, stuff that Mike puts out there, I think is all really beneficial to us as fans and to people that really still somehow care for the team as much as we did 14, 17 years ago. Yeah.
And like we brought that, like, he brought up John Vogel, like that was really the beginning of the Athletic. And, he's not wrong. Like John helped build the building blocks of that Sabres platform, that part of the Sabres coverage for the Athletic. And now it's just really blossomed, man. And it's just been, again, I don't regret the day I subscribed to the Athletic at all. Moving on, I won't try and drag this on too much longer, but last night in our group chat, Josh Edwards, shout out to him. One of the guys who's been helping us out quite a bit. He sent us in our group chat, did you hear what Craig said about you on the After the Whistle podcast? I was like, no, I didn't. It was late at night. It was like close to midnight or after midnight. And I was already half asleep and I didn't listen. And then I woke up again. I woke up this morning to like 5 or 6 text messages asking me if I had heard what Craig said about me on After the Whistle. And so I felt compelled to go on. And backstory here to this is I do listen to their show quite a bit. I enjoy it. I enjoy the banter. I enjoy the banter of most Sabres podcasts. Any Sabres content that I can take in, I will. And I think it's a good way to learn about our own production and how we produce things and what we put out there. And I had been listening to their previous episodes, including their one that they just did this past a couple days ago with Matthew Fairburn. And there has just been like this endless defense of Kevyn Adams and his, qualifications to be a general manager in the National Hockey League by Craig Rivet. And it got to the point where I felt I had to text Andrew and ask him, is he going out of his way? Is he playing devil's advocate intentionally? Because, regardless of what anybody says, when they host a podcast, when they're on and we've done it too, and I'll admit it, whether you knowingly do it or you unknowingly do it, it's okay to play devil's advocate for the sake of, you've done it with me, Connor. I know you have, and I've done it with you. For the sake of good banter, good back and forth, to see both sides.
It's also okay to have a difference of opinion too.
Exactly. But it got to the point where it felt like he was really going out of his way. And I'm listening to what the thing is he's saying. I'm just like, is this guy for real? And this is a guy I've heard sewer Kevyn Adams in the past on that show. And I'm just like, why does it seem like he's doing this intentionally? Not to be like a devil's advocate. And I had to ask. And then I even sent it in my group chat with the two of them. Have you submitted your resume to be the special assistant to the special assistant to the traveling secretary or whatever of Kevyn Adams at the Buffalo Sabres? And I sent the picture of the gif of Dwight Schrute. And he clapped a little bit back at me. I thought it was really good fun. And then I was surprised this morning to hear, well, I'm just going to bring it up right now, to say the least, right here. I'll add it to the stage here and we'll watch it. Here we go.
And that's what people are saying. They're like, man, they read the article too. And it's like, man, he's going hard in the paint.
Going hard in the paint because there's so many fucking haters out here. It's
not
so
haters,
ridiculous.
Man. They're realists.
Yeah, they're all haters.
Oh,
fucking Duane sending me a text, giving me fucking grief. Hey, Duane. Fuck you. How about that, Duane? I'm going to tell you this. Kevyn Adams has done a lot. Yeah, he wasn't in Medicine Hat or Fargo watching friggin' hockey. Okay. Yes, that's true. But Kevyn Adams has done things where it's not like he was given this position and not done anything to work towards it. Yeah.
We worked in the hockey department for what, 4 months, worked in this, it's just the whole, Craig, I guess what I'm saying to you is
that lose the conversation then. If you're gonna fucking talk over me.
It's like,
I just want to play this one more time, not the whole thing, but the start of that, because I generally laughed out loud when I heard it.
And that's what people are saying. They're like, man, they read the article too. And it's like, man, he's going hard in the paint.
Going hard in the paint because there's so many fucking haters out here. It's
not so haters,
ridiculous.
Man. They're realists.
Yeah, they're all haters. Fucking Duane sending me a text, giving me fucking grief. Hey, Duane. Fuck you. How about that?
So, I feel like it was done in good fun. I never got the message from Craig, though. Not that I should, saying, hey, this was all in good fun. But it begs differ. And I know you don't listen to them as avidly as I do, but he is really, and this is my response to it, you are just so way over the top with this, Craig. It generally is giving off the vibe that you are trying to apply for a position with the team. And, I don't know. I love the guy. Here's the thing. I love the guy to death. And this is the confusing part for me, because Kevyn Adams, his entire tenure here, has essentially needed to find a defenseman like him to play with Owen Power. And I think most fans would say that if you can get Craig Rivet reborn in this time era and put him next to Owen Power, I'd say most fans would say, yes, absolutely, sign me up, check that box. So it's really mind-blowing to me to see Craig excuse and justify him being a GM for not just to begin with, but for this long, and going on, even going further, say that, well, because he has a master's degree from Phoenix University, that, he's not just some dumb. And I'm not discounting anybody who's got a master's degree from anywhere and say that can't qualify them to be a general manager in any sport. I'm sure there's plenty of guys who are general managers in all sports that may haven't taken the traditional path. But Connor, would you agree that he is not qualified to be a general manager in the National Hockey League?
Well,
you can play double advocate if you want.
No. I mean, I think most people have agreed for the last however many years, 5 years now, that he never was. I think maybe part of Craig's argument has been swayed by the moves and the things that he's made since he's been GM, right? He has been put, as we've both said, he was put in a really difficult position, not only from a hockey perspective, but a business perspective. Having to fire 20 people who are arguably more qualified than you on your first day on the job is a very difficult thing to do, not just professionally, but emotionally. I can't imagine how hard that must have been, and the type of straight face, not give a fuck attitude you must have to do that specific task. So coming from the position where he was originally to where he is now, the team hasn't made the playoffs, but it's arguably at least maybe a tiny bit better, at least business-wise, than they were in 2019, 2020. They are technically more efficient. I think, especially with the hiring of Jarmo, they are in a better place than they were from a front office perspective. So maybe that's influencing his argument a little bit. But if you get down to the brass tacks, no, he wasn't qualified to be an NHL GM. Anybody that says he was is talking out of their ass. And I'm not saying Craig Rivet is talking out of his ass because he played in the NHL and he does know way more about both the sport and the business of hockey than I do. But you cannot sit there with a straight face and say that a guy who was hired with no other interviews, no other candidates, no experience in a front office, working in a hockey department, working in a scouting department, was qualified to be a GM. You can't do that. So whatever Craig Rivet is doing, and this isn't just me supporting you, this is me looking at the situation subjectively. I mean, objectively, that's fine. You can say whatever you want. If your opinion is influenced by what's happened since, that's great. But that's not also a great argument, given that the playoff drought is now 14 years, and they basically hired a babysitter, a GM in waiting to take over if the team isn't good by November. So you can defend him for the next 5 months, but he might not be the GM of the team in December, before the end of 2025. And that's all that really matters at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. I agree. And this thing, I respect both Andrew and Craig. Rivet for the style of play he had. And listen, I respect a lot of his opinions.
He's a former captain of the team.
Yes.
He clearly had the leadership qualities necessary to not only lead this organization, but play as long as he did in the league. His resume is way on a higher level than both of ours. There's no disrespect coming that way whatsoever. But I think if you not only pull former NHL players, former NHL GMs, former NHL scouts, front office people, NHL fans, 95%, maybe 98% would say that Adams was not qualified to be GM. And media members, everybody, the general human population.
Put it this way. If Kevyn Adams was fired tomorrow and there were 10 GM vacancies in the league, how many of those teams are calling Kevyn Adams for an interview?
I mean, Carolina might be the only one, and that's just because he was in the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. And listen, we could be wrong. He could go to another team and be a fantastic GM, and it turns out it was all Terry Pegula, not allowing him to do what he wanted, and we could eat crow. 100%. Craig could be right. And here's the thing. Kevin has made good moves. I'm not saying the Bowen Byron move was a great move. You won that trade. Hand over fist.
Ryan McLeod move looks really smart.
Looks great. 100%. But You are entering year 6 of your year 6. I believe it's year 6 of your tenure. I could be wrong. I think it's 6, maybe 5. And you are you're no more further ahead than you were when you took the job. And I know you had to navigate some difficult things, the Eichel situation, trading Reinhart. You know, mind you, going back to your point, you didn't have anybody to guide you. That because you were forced to fire everybody. And I think very well Kevyn could have been maybe a good GM, given that he was given the support system to be a good GM. And he wasn't given that. He wasn't. But I remember when he was hired to that business position, I forget the exact job title. And then it was like less than 6 months later, all of a sudden he's a general manager of a team in the midst of a playoff drought. And just like you're being given the keys, and then, oh, by the way, these 20 guys gotta go. You gotta cut bait with them. Sorry. And just, you know, and using like the excuse that you have a master's degree from, you know, and I'm not, you know, I have a bachelor's degree from Buffalo State. Does that qualify me for a position anywhere? Not a master's. And I'm not taking the, quick dirty shots at Craig here, but like, and this isn't a shot at anybody who has a degree, but do you remember, many of you remember the commercials from Phoenix University? They're like, you know, these online courses you can take. And I'm not taking shots at people who've done that, but that's not an argument to make that your general manager took online courses to get his master's.
I mean, it supports the argument that he was underqualified. Like, yes, it doesn't take anything away from the fact that he did it, because it's not easy to do. It's not easy for anybody to go on and pursue something that they want to do to enhance their resume, right? But if he's doing that on the job after already being like he did it after he accepted the position, right? Or was it during the time he was in the hockey department? I forget when he took the online classes. Yeah. Either way, doesn't matter. If you're learning on the job, as Fairburn just told us that he has been doing since 2020, it means that inherently you were unqualified. Point blank, period.
I agree. And just you talk about shortcuts. He almost essentially, if you want to say, and again, I'm not taking shots at people who have done this, because getting your master's has got to be difficult.
Yeah, it's hard to do, no matter if it's
very difficult to do.
In a school, no matter what it is. But the fact that he had to do it afterwards means that the qualifications weren't there.
And not to mention, it's almost like you took a shortcut to get it compared to I want to say the hard route, but he took an easier route to get it than traditionally how you get your master's degree. And again, I'm not trying to take shots.
No, I mean,
I have no idea what it's like to get an online degree.
It's a modern way to do it, but it is the less traditional route. Yeah.
Yes, just like the route he took to be a GM. I don't know, man. Like I am not a guy. I'm somebody who has complained about having not in my current job, but in the past, having guys above me that were there just strictly because of relationships. And I get it. Kevyn Adams played a long time in the NHL, and it has happened in the past where you have GMs who, you know, are there kind of basically on their playing career. I mean, he was there for the final face-off in the finals when they won the cup in the defensive zone. He was taking that face-off. Clearly, he was a good player, or, you know, responsible player, and you know, I'm not going to take anything away from his playing career. But, like, come on, man. What are we doing here? Like, what are we doing? And I'm a guy, I want Kevyn to succeed. I don't want Kevyn to get fired. I'm not out there chanting, fire Kevyn at games. Have I talked about it on this podcast? Have I talked it on social media? Absolutely, I have. But, like, I want him to succeed. I want us all to sit here and, like, eat crow and, like, you know, we told you. I want somebody to point at us, like, told you he was the right man for the job. I want to.
I mean, let's be perfectly honest. It's a miracle that he got the job, and it's a miracle he still has the job.
Agreed. And listen, and it's funny too, because like you see, it's like you love Craig. I love Craig. I love a lot of his takes. I love him as a human being. He's a great friend. He's been an amazing friend to Andrew, and Andrew's been an amazing friend to me. You know, for non-hockey related reasons and reasons only known to Andrew. And he's, you know, a great human being, and not sitting there trying to pump his tires, but it's true. But like, this is just a take where I'm thinking he's going to die on this island by himself. And he'll be there with all the troll accounts that you see online who will come to the aid of Kevyn Adams and Terry Pegula. He's on that island with those guys. And that's where he is.
That island to me is so pointless, because at the end of the day, I think we're all united in a common goal of this team being relevant again. Not even necessarily making a run in the playoffs, but even being relevant. Like getting to the point where even in 2023, in the end of 2023, when we were all as excited as we have been since 2011, just to have a shot at the playoffs, not even like make the playoffs. If next season they have a similar run at the end of the year to even be a point out, I think we would all take that in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
That you're relevant. You're playing in games that matter at the end of the season. We've regressed, or the Sabres have regressed in 2 straight seasons since that time when we all thought we were going to get there. I flew home for the home opener in 2023 against the Rangers when they started Devin Levi. Not Devin Levi's fault at all, but they had no other plan but to start the guy who was one of the main reasons for that end of the season run in 2023, when they probably damn well knew that he wasn't fully ready yet. They were just hoping. They were hoping that he would be. And turns out it's a lot of hope and not much projection and not much common sense. So Craig and all those other troll accounts and Alex Jones and all those people on that island, have fun on that island, because that island may sink in mid-November when Kevyn Adams gets fired and we start all over again with Jarmo Kekäläinen and trying to rebuild this organization. More than anything, it's the best thing I think they've done in the past 5 to 6 years, hiring him, getting somebody with a respected, experienced voice in front office into this organization. And yeah, we'll see what happens in the next month and a half, because that's obviously going to change the trajectory of this hockey team and the franchise moving forward.
I did mention, and I actually agree with, before I get to that, I agree with all those points. Like, we're not here, to shit on Craig Rivet, even though he kind of shit on me this morning. He did.
I do. Like you said, I do think that was at least like
playfully,
or partially in jest. Yeah.
Yeah, playfully. Yeah. I have to give it back to him. I have to.
That's in the nature of good chirping.
Yes, I have to. And I hope he doesn't take this to heart, because I do love the guy. I do plan on attending their draft party. Maybe
and if he does, fuck him.
Fuck him. Fuck him. Yeah. Hey, Craig. Fuck you. That's my response to you saying "fuck me, fuck you,
fuck me, fuck me, fuck you,
fuck me, fuck you." But like, listen, I do plan on attending that draft party. I got the invite from Andrew. I'm gonna be there. I'm hoping that you, obviously, with different time zones, maybe we can make something work where we can do a live pod there. We'll see. We'll see if that works out like that. But I think I'm just gonna wear a Team Andrew shirt and just shove it up his hoop. Maybe get some Photoshop pictures of him arm in arm with Kevyn and Terry. Ask him to sign them. Like, can you sign this for me?
Sure, that would go over well.
I do want to come to my next point. I don't know if he is gonna hop on with us. I'm texting him right now. I did kind of tease a special guest who wanted to hop in for 5 minutes. I'm not going to say his name, but I'm currently messaging him right now. I'm waiting for a response, but before we'll see if he hops in. I gave him the option. Because I never said that it was a definite. I said might in all capital letters. But any final thoughts here from you, Hurls, in terms of just the way today's episode, the topic of today's episode, and just anything we talked about?
Yeah, I think Matthew's article is an inflection point in a very pivotal offseason. I think it speaks to not only the past of what's happened, which was mainly what the article was about, but also the present and the future. I think the biggest affirmation of that article was the hiring of Jarmo Kekäläinen. Was not only Kevyn acknowledging that he needed a more experienced voice in the organization, but Terry acknowledging that if this doesn't work 2 months into this season, then guess what, buddy? You're gone. And we actually have a guy who's done the job before, who is qualified to be an NHL GM, who has gone the traditional route to get that job and lead an NHL franchise, as we saw in Columbus. So yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for Matthew's reporting. I'm thankful for these discussions, because what else are we going to talk about in the middle of June? And yeah, we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, a lot is very much dependent on the decisions they make with RFAs, the decision they make on whether or not to keep Bowen Byram, and obviously the decision on what happens with the first pick in the draft. Obviously, it's not the most enticing draft in terms of prospects and high-level generational superstars or potential generational superstars, but if they do keep the pick, I think it could be a really good player. And if they don't, then I think that's even more exciting for all of us, because obviously that means that it would be a part of a package to get an NHL-ready guy, potentially to play with Owen Power or enter the top 6. So as slow as it seems right now, it is going to pick up in the next couple of weeks, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, are you team trade the pick, or are you team use the pick?
Yeah.
Or are you,
Yeah,
like,
if you can trade that pick, you trade that pick without question.
If you're using the pick, who's the top of your list?
I think it really depends on how the board falls, but in terms of what they currently don't have enough of in the pipeline, it's a right-handed defenseman. And if Radim Merkita, we should really figure out how to pronounce his name, the 6'7" defenseman, right-handed defenseman. I think he was in the OHL. I could also be wrong on that. Everybody go look it up. His last name is Mrkta, Radim Merkita. That is who I ideally would like the Sabres to select if they do end up making that pick. And if it's not him, there's a few power forwards that I do think could add a lot to this organization. It seems like Brady Martin has a lot of hype right now to go in the top 5, maybe even top 7. There's this guy named Roger McQueen that I think would be really good as well. But something that the pipeline currently doesn't have, which is bigger, tougher forwards or defensemen that could round out the player profile in the organization.
I do have he did hop in. He is here. I do want to introduce everybody, bring in a returning guest. He said, tell this guy to shut the fuck up so I can come on the show.
You could have brought him in. I don't care.
Andrew Peters is joining the podcast.
What's up, Andrew? Sorry, buddy. I didn't know it was you in the waiting room. I would have stopped talking a long time ago.
I don't want to talk to you anyway.
Given the his name thing there. Fuck you, Duane.
How am I doing? Is this thing working?
Yeah, you're perfect. You're perfect, bud.
Really?
Yep. Oh yeah. You're good.
How are you guys doing?
We're good.
Sorry I'm joining so late. Have you guys been going for an hour and a half?
Yeah. Listen, we had Matthew on. Obviously, you guys had him on for your Monday show.
Yeah.
He's a great guest, and he doesn't just give you like meat and potatoes answers. He really gets, he gives you a very well thought out, articulated answer, which always makes for a good show.
Well, his article is a direct representation of that. That's for sure. But no, he was great on our show too. I look forward to listening to him on your show. But yeah, sorry I jumped on late. I really only came on to just say, fuck you, Craig. That's really all I want. How did that make you feel when you heard that?
Listen, it's funny too, because I texted you last night. Did Craig really tell me to fuck off or something? It was like after midnight. I was like half asleep when I heard our friend Josh said it in our group chat, and I just didn't really think much of it, and I went to bed. And then I woke up to like 5 or 6 texts like, yo, like Craig just said fuck Duane on the show.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I edit everything, right? So, I contemplated editing that out, but it was just such a fun kind of fuck you that it was like, no big deal. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know why he's taking it out on you. He's the guy that sounds like an I have no idea. And I said this today when we were on Shred and Reg, and I'm like, I talk to this guy every day, and I ask him, I'm like, are you serious about your stance on this? Like, are you? And people are calling him out, like, how he was praising Kekäläinen's experience, and then all of a sudden, I just can't. So I just wanted to come on and just apologize to everybody.
I remember I texted you. I was like, before this whole, he said that. I was just like, is he going out of his way to defend Kevin? I'm not understanding this at all.
No, I think, you know what I think? I think he just likes to, I'm not going to say take the other side, but I truly think he just is sick of all the negativity. But I mean, I don't know. I said to him on the phone today, I'm like, I completely disrespectfully disagree with everything you're saying. and I'm just like, we've never been at odds on a topic so much that I'm actually baffled when I'm driving in my car to the point where I'm like, holy shit, I don't have any music on. All I'm thinking about is like how fucking stupid Craig sounds.
You're like in the car in silence, just getting angrier and angrier.
No, I'm just messing around. I'm totally kidding with you. Like, but you know, he has his stance. But I mean, it is such a difference of opinion. But it's I can tell you honestly, and I wish that it's frustrating the shit out of me. Like I tell him, I'm like, the shtick is up, man. Like, people don't want like a good cop, bad cop. He's like, this isn't good cop, bad cop. He's like, I'm sick and tired of how easy it is for people to just shit on Kevyn Adams. And I'm just like, I have no idea where this is coming from. But anyway, I don't have long tonight, guys, but
I said 5 to 10 minutes would have been perfect.
I just think it's hilarious that you posted that today.
Though the video, the
sound bite, because
yeah.
You know, but listen, I'm gonna tell you, man. Like, I have friends that are messaging me, and they're just like Team Andrew all the way.
Like
these are people that work in the game that he knows, that just know the truth, you know. And it's like, I just said to him, it's an interesting hill to die on, man. Unless you get hired by the team, and then it all makes sense.
Special assistant to the special assistant.
Special assistant, yeah. Special.
I mean, Mike, real quick, he can't be surprised by the response, right? Like, I think he knows that he's in the minority. He has to at this point.
Yeah, he said to me, he's like, man, I'm getting killed, eh? And I'm just like, yeah.
What did you think was gonna happen?
Yeah. I'm like, you may as well, at this point, you're so far in.
Yeah.
You may as well just change your name to Pegula.
He's in too deep.
He's in. And I don't know, like, I don't believe it's a troll job. You know, I mean, I think he has, you know, he's smart enough to do that from time to time just to kind of create a stir, but I don't think this is that. Like, I think I don't know.
His heart's in it, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes like you get to a point in an argument where like you're so invested in it that it's so hard to turn back. Yeah, I don't know if this is that situation for him. And like, I love the guy. I love how good of a friend he's been to you, and how good of a friend you've been to me, for obviously reasons only known to you. And just like, you know, I to your point, I am so Team Andrew here.
I tried to get him to come on.
There's no questioning it.
I tried to get him to come on today so badly. I'm like, come on. I'm like, you got to come on. You got to come and explain yourself. No, explain myself.
Somebody who will be objective or subject. Maybe Hurls can be that guy. He can be. Yeah. He you know, I think Hurls. I can't be it because I'll cut him off. But like, I can't. No way. I'm so anti Craig Rivet thought process right now. It's just not even funny.
I would hear him out, and like we said earlier before he came on, like, he knows way more about hockey than we do, you know. Yeah. And he has way more of a resume, and for him to have an opinion, it needs to be taken seriously, right? Even if it's as like contrarian as it is at the moment. So therefore, like, I think it deserves to be heard, but at the same time, when you're in such a minority and the Sabres are in a 14-year playoff drought as they are, it's hard to have that type of opinion and survive the next day.
Yeah, he's I've said this before, and I mean it. He's by far one of the smartest hockey people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much working with him over the years, like just even from when we first started and come on every now and then as as a guest when I was working with Kevin Sylvester the 2 days a week out of the Sabres store closet there, whatever we were doing. But he would come on, and he was just, ever since then, like you just continue to learn from him. I mean, I only played 1 year from him or with him, so the more you talk to him every day, you learn how much he knows, and he researches, and he's a sponge for information. But clearly sometimes, take notice, people, and see what, drinking can do.
I think that's the most frustrating. That makes it even more frustrating how smart of a hockey guy he is. Like I said it earlier, like if you could mold and Craig Rivet in this time and put him next to Owen Power, you would in a heartbeat. Every fan would agree.
He's exactly what the Sabres need.
Yes. Which makes it more infuriating.
I actually know for a fact that somewhere this year, Lindy Ruff said to somebody, we could use a guy like Rivet as a player, not as like, but they could definitely use him on the bench or in the front office. But yeah, no, it's been a fun few episodes because
I've loved it.
I sit back and I listen to him, and I fight him on all of it because I just think it's just so ridiculous. And I think I'm the sucker. I think I'm the sucker.
You're not the sucker, no.
I think I'm the sucker, but no, man. Listen, we'll see where it goes because, I mean, Kevin has until Thanksgiving probably to get this.
American or Canadian?
Hopefully Canadian. It's Columbus Day weekend. You know what I mean?
Before the season starts.
How ironic to do it on Columbus Day weekend and replace it with Jarmo Kekäläinen on Columbus Day weekend. But
oh my God, great.
No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows? This has got to be his last lifeline, and man, I don't know. I mean, I wonder, like, if this is Craig's resume. Like, did you guys hear today's episode at all? Did you hear those?
Yes.
Oh, like the University of Phoenix thing just drives me wild. It's incredible, and I believe it or not, I logged in and signed up, and I was accepted right on the spot tonight. So I'll be the GM in 18 months. But
I said it's no disrespect to anybody who gets their master's degree or
I have no degree. I have no degree. I have none. But all I meant by that when I said it, Duane, was when you think of somebody in a executive business position in the National Hockey League, I mean, you think they're further removed out of college than that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but anyway,
you would think that
I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole. I know it can be an asshole, for fun or entertainment or whatever, but nothing's personal. If you just don't make it personal, then
no. You would think
say whatever you want.
You would think the GM got his degree, the traditional way, not when he was watching The Price is Right in the middle of the day and a University of Phoenix commercial came on. And it's almost like he took the same shortcut to get his degree. And there's no disrespect to anybody who's done that. But
the other non-traditional GM in the league is Joe Sakic. So that's a little bit different of a route, right? Like, he didn't come up through watching games in Medicine Hat. Joe Sakic was one of the best players in NHL history. So you're either one or the other.
Yeah.
Kevyn Adams wasn't that.
So, Andrew, thanks for popping in as a surprise guest, man. I appreciate it, bud.
Enjoy your night, guys. Sorry, I'm half asleep.
No, you're good. It's the time for 10 o'clock. So that was Andrew Peters popping in as a surprise guest here on episode 194. Connor, real good episode tonight. Had a lot of fun. Probably went a little bit longer than we expected, but definitely always great to have Matthew on, and pleasant surprise to have Andrew pop in there at the end.
Final thoughts. Fuck you, Duane.
Fuck you, Duane. Fuck you, Craig. Signing off. This has been episode 194. Two Goalies on Mike, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier American and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from. If you need a beer, make sure you make it a Fatty Beer. Let them know Two Goalies on Mike sent ya. And we'll talk to you later. As always, go Sabres.